If you've worked with 3ds Max for any length of time, you've no doubt noticed that the software creates each and every object it makes in relation to the grid that you see in the perspective view. That grid is referred to as the scene's construction plane. And things made in the perspective view have strictly been told that their pivot point should rest flat in line with that plane, no matter where in the scene those things are created. And you can see that with all things: objects, shapes, lights, and cameras. No matter what you make, plan on it lying up against the grid. To show you that, I'll throw one of each into the scene. There's the bottom of the cylinder. There's our rectangle shape. Here's a spotlight. And there's a target camera. I'll select them all with Ctrl-A, then hit Delete. Now, building up directly against the grid doesn't always have to be the case. Max has a couple of different ways that you can go to create things away from the regular grid or construction plane orientation. You can make your own grid, or you can use a handy little feature called AutoGrid. Let's take a look at them both. Max's grid objects are found under the Helpers tab in the Create column. Located on the right-hand side, you simply activate the button, then draw one in the view. Let's now rotate our new grid into an odd angle. Until the new grid is recognized by Max, you'll still be creating your objects in relation to the original construction grid. We can see that by going back to the Geometry column and making a few objects. If we instead select the grid and activate it, we'll be able to use it and not the perspective grid from which to build. Here's how that's done. In the viewport, we'll select the grid. We'll then right-click, then on the left-hand side of the menu, we'll choose Activate Grid. You'll notice that by doing that, we've now grayed out our original construction grid. Watch what happens if we now make a few more objects. The cylinder just made doesn't lie flat with the original construction grid. It instead was created at the orientation of the grid that we created, then activated. Let's see how that new grid angle works with creating both a box and a cone. Now, there's nothing that says that we have to stay directly in line with the extents of the grid object. With that grid activated, anywhere we click on the screen, our new object will be created in that orientation. Turn the primary construction grid back on, and we're back to making things in relation to it. To do that, we'll select the grid we made again. Back in the right-click menu up on the left-hand side, we'll this time choose Activate Home Grid. Putting the original construction grid back into play, watch what happens when we now make a few more things. You again can very easily see the difference between building up against the construction grid and building up against your own custom grid. Now, 3ds Max also offers, as mentioned, an option called AutoGrid, which enables you to create your objects in relation to existing surfaces in your scene. It's a terrific tool, especially when wanting to make objects on top of other objects. Let's delete all the stuff on our scene so we can clear the playing field. Again, I'll simply hit Ctrl-A, then Delete. Okay, for this example, we'll draw a large but rather short cylinder in the middle of our grid. Let's now, about an inch above the cylinder button, activate AutoGrid. Notice that as you drag your mouse around the screen, it's being followed by a three-colored icon that looks kind of like the transformation gizmo. If you now position your mouse somewhere directly on top of the cylinder, you'll see how the cursor is changing directions as it senses the surface underneath. If we now hold the mouse button down and drag away, our new cylinder will be made in relation to the surface of the first cylinder. And it doesn't matter what shape object you make. As long as the AutoGrid option has been activated, the new object will be made in relation to the surface that the mouse is over when it's created. So that's both the grid and the AutoGrid. Not something you're going to be using all the time, but two objects for creating objects that definitely will have their time and place in many a project.